job of moderating this. So I think I get to ask one question and then I'll be quiet. But let me start, because some of you might not have the sort of full picture. Since we have the guy that wrote the book here, Conscious Capitalism, let me ask Raj, would you take just a minute and give us your understanding of conscious capitalism and its four tenets?
Sure. Very happy to be here with all of you. Conscious capitalism basically is a philosophy of thinking about business that is different than the traditional narrative that's been around for a century or more, which is that business is all about profit. The only purpose of business is to make money, and the only stakeholder that matters is shareholders, and everybody else is a means to that end. And conscious capitalism says that every business, like every individual, should define its own purpose. Right? As Ed beautifully puts it, we human beings need red blood cells in order to survive. Doesn't mean that we should dedicate our lives to producing red blood cells. And likewise, businesses need profits to survive and to grow, but they should define a purpose other than profit, which is the reason why they exist. Right? So a higher purpose, so you heard about Container Store helping you lead organized lives so you can be happier. Whole Foods, of course, is about educating people that what you put into your body makes a difference to your health, the health of the food system, and the planet as a whole. The second is stakeholder integration, so creating value for all stakeholders. And again, Ed Freeman is the pioneer thought leader in that, but simultaneously looking to create win-win-win-win outcomes. So you never make a decision where you're harming one stakeholder simply to benefit another. And you don't just look to balance, you actually look to elevate everybody. And you treat all of them as ends in themselves, not as means to the end of making money. Right? So the well-being of customers and the well-being of employees and their families and their communities and the environment, all inherently important. And the third is conscious leadership, that we need leaders who actually care about purpose, who care about people, and who are not all about their own power and personal enrichment. Right? So they're more selfless leaders, and they're leading by mentoring, motivating, developing, and inspiring people. They're not command and control, carrots and sticks type of leaders. And the last is a culture that is built not upon fear and stress and excessive internal competition, but is built upon trust and authenticity and fun, and most importantly, I think, love and care. Businesses built on love and care rather than fear and stress are much more powerful businesses that also allow everyone to thrive. So those are the four simple ideas that really underlie this, but each one is quite different than the traditional practice.
So let me pretend to be the skeptic for a minute here.
That Raj is getting that stuff down, and he's kind of got that conscious capitalism stuff down.
He should write a book.
Yeah, he should.
Let me pretend to be the skeptic for a minute. Jeff, you've been in the investment world. Adrian, you're in the investment world. Well, you are too, Jeff. Well, isn't this just idealism? I mean, sounds nice, but really. What's your take on that?
After you. After me? Okay. Well, as Raj says, what's wrong with being with idealism? I think that idealism is a good thing, and we all have to have ideals. Raj talked about this yesterday. But, you know, for us in the investment business, I love when people ask that question, right? Isn't this just idealism? And, you know, it's not like this in the real world, is it? And the reason I love that is because what we do is we invest in early stage businesses and we train them on how to operate their business using the tenets of conscious capitalism. And we know from my history, and Adrian's going to talk more about this, that if you operate using these tenets, you are more than likely to outperform your peer set. So we love the skeptics at the Conscious Venture Lab because we're investing in 5 to 10, maybe 15 companies a year. And if their competitors are in that skeptic arena, then we know that we'll have an inordinate amount of winners in our businesses, because the only thing that can't really be copied, everything, you know, there's always a reversion of the mean in any business you're in. And the thing that can't be copied, we see over and over and over again, is the culture of these organizations. And a lot of what Raj has written about and what you've talked about, Ed, is about how these companies treat people, treat each other, treat their suppliers, treat their stakeholders. And that's the thing that really generates competitive advantage. So, there's nothing wrong with being an idealist, and we celebrate the skeptics because it makes us more successful.
Yeah, and by idealistic, it sort of means unrealistic in one sense, right? And I'm very grateful for the fact that people think this stuff is idealistic, because if they didn't, I wouldn't have a job, right? Because our job is to outperform the market or outperform other investors. One way we do that is by bringing this perspective into our analysis of companies, and most people don't do it. They look at a business as a sort of a collection of numbers, some sort of disembodied entity with a ticker symbol, right? And I think all of us, probably I'm guilty of it, also forget that there's a bunch of human beings interacting with each other and creating something. We look at bankrupt companies primarily, and who wants to be a part of a bankrupt company? Unless you really want to be a part of a bankrupt company, right? And so if you're going to try and sift through and look at a bunch of companies that are bankrupt or in a difficult situation and try and understand and predict which ones are going to make it, the ones that have been doing the kind of stuff that Kip and the rest of these guys actually practice are the ones that are going to make it. And similarly, if you're looking at the world of companies that are heading into dire straits, I can almost guarantee that I'm never going to look at your business.
Thank goodness.
Except for my personal account, which I own it. I highly recommend it. It's a good way to predict who's gonna survive in the long term. So I welcome the skeptics and the people who think it's unrealistic, because it gives us a little bit of an extra edge.
So let me ask you guys. Start with Kip. How did you get to this? How did you? We all grow up with the idea that capitalism and business is a bunch of greedy little bastards out trying to do each other in, competing with each other. The urge to compete is what makes capitalism, go. You see this in the newspapers and TV, and I think the number of murders committed by business people on TV is, 80% or something like that? It's unbelievable. So how did you get to this idea where you talk about love and caring, not competition? You talk about win-win, not win-lose, because it's absolutely counter to the story of business that's in our culture. And I don't mean just in the US, it's in culture all over the world.
Business is not a zero-sum game. When I was getting out of school, I was very interested in philosophy, and I didn't think you should have one code of conduct for your personal life and then a looser code of conduct for your business life. The thing about, you got to understand, don't take it personally, it's just business. It's like, no, I don't understand. It should be the same
I love it in sports when people say, oh, this is a business.
Yeah.
Okay, so loyalty, human stuff doesn't matter. It's just about the money.
Right.
It's not personal.
It's not personal, it's just about the money.
And then I think it gets reinforced as you create a business and build a culture. The reaction you get from manufacturers, the reaction you get from your employees, it works better. They are receptive to it. They are open to it. You can build more profitable relationships with them than you can by somehow trying to get viewing them as a zero-sum game thing. And the skepticism increases in direct proportion to how sophisticated a business person you're dealing with. Raj and I gave a speech in San Antonio to all of the business school deans about conscious capitalism. There was no skepticism whatsoever by that group. But the week before that, I gave a speech at St. Mark's School, which is the most exclusive competitive boys' school in Dallas, to all their graduating seniors. And they were skeptical as hell, So, but those smart kids will be less skeptical once they become deans of the business schools. So, it's amazing.
We should hope.
How did you come to this?
Well, I came to this in a roundabout way. I was sort of a disgruntled marketing professor, disgruntled in the sense that I didn't have a sense of purpose. It was just a job.
Isn't disgruntled marketing professor redundant?
Is it? Hey, this is being videotaped, okay?
Those are called pleonasms, I think.
No, but I kind of stumbled into that path as just a job, right, and a career, but really not a calling. It never spoke to me at any deep level. And for years, I spent, about 10 years, I did research on how marketing doesn't work very well. In this country, there are many things that America leads the world in, and one of them is marketing. We have 5% of the world's population, and it used to be 50% of the world's marketing spending. Now it's about 30%, because the rest of the world is copying American-style marketing, right? But $1 trillion a year, imagine that, $1 trillion a year on ads and coupons and things like that, equal to the GDP of India in 2007 when we did the analysis, right? We spend all that on ads and coupons, and who's benefiting? You all love advertising, and 1,800 messages a day. So we found even customers, companies, and society, none of them are really benefiting from this extraordinary amount of money that's going into this. In fact, there's a lot of harm that's happening as well alongside. So I finally, in pursuing that research, I was actually going to write a book called Marketing Malpractices, making the case in even greater detail about how bad things were. And then I got the advice to say that in this country, people want to hear about the solution, not the problem. Right? And that's kind of my daughters would say, duh, right? But for me, it was a light bulb went off, and I just turned that around to call it In Search of Marketing Excellence. And we simply started to look for companies that don't have to spend a lot of money on ads and coupons and have customers who love them and are loyal and trusting, because most companies, it's the other way around. And just with that little entry point, we started to discover a bunch of companies where it wasn't just true for customers, it was also true for employees and communities and suppliers and everybody. Everybody loved these companies. So that ended up as a book called Firms of Endearment, or companies that are loved by everybody. And they also had these other qualities, right? They stood for something. There's a reason why they existed. They were not just another retailer or grocery store, etc. So they had the purpose, and they had these amazing leaders who were not like your imperial style leaders that you typically find in companies, and wonderful culture. So that was and for the first time, I felt alive and engaged and passionate about what I was doing. So I moved from a job and a career to a calling. And by the way, at the end of that analysis, when we looked at the financial performance, after the fact, we didn't pick these companies based on financials. We picked them because of, they met these criteria. We found that they actually outperformed the market 9-1 over a 10-year period, despite paying their people in some cases double, like Costco does, like Container Store does, providing great benefits, looking after customers, investing in community and the environment, treating their suppliers well, and paying taxes at a higher rate. Despite all of that, they're making a lot more money for investors as well. So this is the ultimate positive sum game in the world of business, and we don't realize the power of business to do much more good than we have used it for in the past.
Jeff, how did you get to Conscious Venture Lab?
Well, I was young and arrogant at one point in my life, and I decided that I wanted to work for myself. So I've had the good luck, or the only good luck, of never having worked for anyone else in a professional capacity. So when I started my first company, I didn't know any better. I had never worked in corporate America, so I didn't know that we needed a hierarchy. I didn't know that we were supposed to treat people poorly. I didn't know that we were, so because I had never done that before.
You didn't go to business school?
No, I didn't go to business. I went to architecture school, as you know. Yeah, I wasn't trained to do it in business school either. I went to architecture school, so I was thinking, from a design standpoint, how are we going to create this thing? So I was coming up with all these crazy ideas. We're going to have this atomic structure and this flat structure, and guys were looking at me like, what the hell are you talking about? But it just sort of seemed natural to me that we wanted to get everyone, as much as we could, engaged in our success. So it started sort of naturally. We morphed my architectural firm into a consulting practice for lots of different reasons. But as we got into doing strategy consulting, we found out that it was really interesting that lots of the companies that we worked for that were the most successful, and these were small and mid-sized businesses mostly, that the ones that, as Kip said earlier, that were myopically focused on the bottom line, never did as well as the ones who were coming to us asking questions about, hey, how do we get our employees to really give a damn about this place, right? How do we get suppliers to feel like they're in a partnership? How do we get our customers to feel like they're in a relationship? Those companies that were asking those questions were successful. So we sort of said, yeah, this makes sense to us. And then a couple of my partners were friends with Raj's co-author on Firms of Endearment, David Wolf. and had done some work with David, and that's how I met Raj. And as Raj was finishing up the work on Firms of Endearment, he knew a little bit about what we were doing, sent us the manuscript, and really reading that book sort of changed my life. I said, yeah, this all sort of makes sense. I didn't know what to call it, and that's sort of how we started down that path. So lots of things, different things happened. We sold that company. We actually started a hedge fund that was based on the concepts of Firms of Endearment. We took everything that we had learned over running our business for 20 years and reading the book and hearing what Raj was doing. We turned that into an investment practice to invest in publicly traded companies. A little different than what Adrian does. We were just looking at trying to find the good actors. But I became a little bit, I won't say disillusioned, but I wanted to go in a different direction. That investing in Whole Foods was not going to change the way that Safeway operated. They want to mimic their product mix, but they couldn't mimic their culture. So we weren't creating any new businesses that are operating like this way, and that was really important to us. So I left that, I started the Conscious Venture Lab, and that's what we're trying to do now, invest in and create businesses from the ground up that operate this way.
Adrian, you did go to business school. How did you get through and help start Plustek with some of these ideas at its foundation?
Probably had something to do with you, I'd guess. No, I mean,
It was
a
school
lot of
here,
people
it
can
was
probably
hard,
say
wasn't
that.
it?
Yeah. You know, your perspective on how to think about business when you've heard it in sort of contrast to the way that business can be practiced typically, and I think Kip, you touched on that in your speech. Once you flip your head around and realize how stupid that really is, it's sort of hard to go back. To think of a business as an isolated entity that produces money for a certain group of people is to miss how business actually gets done. And so I would see people, it clicked with me in my personal experience of seeing people in businesses assuming that if that supplier does, if they don't like the terms, we'll just get the next one. Someone else is in line and someone else is in line. And that kind of a mindset builds in over time, and it becomes transactional. There are no relationships, and then when things go bad, there's no one left. And to the contrary, if you've built good relationships, when things go bad, there's someone there to help you out because they want you to succeed. And that to me was a pretty profound flip on the way the typical narrative is told. And I didn't think that most people investing professionally had that perspective. Although when I talk to them about it, they say it makes perfect sense. They just don't call it conscious. They call it bottoms-up research or something. But it's conscious capitalism.
So, Kip, is it any different now that you're a public company?
Not really. Really not at all. We're determined to not let it be. Jim Sinegal says, don't care what the stock price is until 10 years from now. That's pretty hard to do.
Wait, say that again?
He says, don't care what the stock price is until 10 years out into the future. That's pretty hard to do. I look at it every day, several times.
I'm a shareholder. I look at it every day, too.
Not much. You spend a lot more time with the stakeholder than you do when you're private. A lot more time because you have all these analysts, you have all the institutional investors but an interesting thing that I've found is if you have your ego in check, if you're pretty comfortable with your business and yourself, you can learn a lot from people being public because everybody knows more about your business now. They've read your S1. They actually do know more about the Container Store than they did before. And so, you can go crazy listening to nobody ever wrote a negative article about the Container Store until we went public, and now they get written all the time, I told my friend Danny Meyer, who just took Shake Shack public, the great hamburger, I said, now people are writing, those burgers aren't very good. I'm like, people stand in line for an hour and a half for them. Of course they're good. In New York, everybody stands in line for an hour and a half. Yeah. So I forgot where I was going with all that, but we're determined not to change anything just because we're public. And the main reason we went public is because it's very hard to get stock in the hands of your employees when you're private. Your partners don't want to dilute themselves in favor of that's the only way you can get stock in the hands of your employees. And so when you're public, it's standard operating procedure. Everybody has stock options, and so we were able to do that. And now about 25% of our employees own a part of the company, which I think is great. Same
Raj,
company.
I know you're on a lot of boards of companies that practice conscious capitalism, including the Container Store. What's it like as a board member as you think about these principles of conscious capitalism, et cetera? Is the boardroom, which is traditionally seen as the representative of shareholders only, is that changing in your experience?
Yeah, I think it is changing. The consciousness is growing slowly, although not nearly fast enough. I think I've experienced working with CEOs who very much started down this path and were completely convinced, and then they got the rug pulled out from under them by the board, who simply took that narrow definition of fiduciary responsibility as only extending to shareholders. In fact, that is not even a requirement in the law. The law says that you are responsible to the well-being of the corporation, which is its own thing. Right? So the leaders of the company don't work for the shareholders. They work for the corporation. And the shareholders are just one piece of that. So I do think that is improving, but it is, I think, a significant challenge to get boards of directors, which tend to be older, more male, people who have succeeded very well for themselves under the old paradigm. And it's, when people have done very well believing a certain set of things, it's very hard to get them to start believing a different set of things because it has worked well for them. The boards that I've been fortunate to serve on are very much committed to this. And, so we don't have that particular issue. But I think overall, it is a significant challenge. And I don't know that we do a good job addressing that in business schools or even in our movement. I mean, I've spoken to the National Association of Corporate Directors, and there was receptivity there. But I don't think we're doing enough. We're not paying enough attention to that issue.
So,
by the way, if we get more women on those boards, I think it'll make a difference. And we don't have nearly enough.
So I want everybody's view on this. I know there are a lot of people here who have started companies or are going to start companies, etc. What's your best advice to them? Jeff, this is kind of what you do. So let me start with you. I've been to the Conscious Venture Lab, and you've got some incredible entrepreneurs that are there. What advice would you give to people who want to help rewrite this story of business, not by being deadbeat academics like Raj and I, but actually out there, doing something, the way Kip has?
First of all, buy Conscious Capitalism and Uncontainable. That's the first thing you should do, and read them both. I think that really it's just sort of, the interesting thing about this is entrepreneurs usually get this, right? They get it in their guts.
Yeah, I think the only place where entrepreneurs start a business that maximizes profits is in business school textbooks.
Right, exactly, right. Or if they're an entrepreneur within a large company, someone says to me, well, I started the business. Oh, you did? Where? Well, I used to work for IBM, and I'm like, that doesn't count, right? You can't start a business with an IBM. You have a big safety net, right? When you start a business as an entrepreneur, generally, you're all in, right? If the thing fails, you go down with it. But entrepreneurs generally get this. They start businesses because they have a passion about something. They see a real problem that they would really just like to solve. No one gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to start a business. Why? Really because I want to make a lot of money. Because if you do that, no one's really going to care, right? So I think that entrepreneurs generally get this. So the biggest piece of advice we give to entrepreneurs is, lead with your heart. Because we know you already get this. What happens is they get it, and then they say, well, this happens to us all the time. When we start out with our purpose discussion at the Conscious Venture Lab, it takes a long time for us to get out of people the purpose of their own personal purpose and the purpose of starting the business. It usually takes us about a month worth of discussion with them and worth of this process. And once we get it, they're like, well, I sort of knew that all along, but I thought we weren't allowed to talk about that. Right? So,
and they're embarrassed when
they have to say it. So the first thing is lead with your heart and stick to your guns, right? Because I know, I've done this enough times now, we've got, You know, we're 2 years into the Conscious Venture Lab. I started a bunch of businesses myself as well. So we've invested in, 10 companies and talked to hundreds more. We know that entrepreneurs usually get this, and they just have to sort of stay the path. I think the next thing to do is, I'm serious about reading the books, because the thing that happens after that is, okay, I get this, Jeff. What do I do tomorrow, right? How do I operate a business like this on the ground? So it really is about then taking these ideas and seeking out folks that can tell you about what, how do you actually run a business based on these tenets. It's not as easy as it might sound. It takes some work.
Adrian, I know you've involved in advertising. I think a company you helped start, and you've started some other ventures, and now Plustic. What advice do you have to people who want to start a business based on these ideas?
I think be selective of who you work with is important, and be thoughtful that you interact with people who you can trust. That's sort of self-evident, but in the heat of it, sometimes you can cut corners there. And I think just. Oh,
that's right. You started a business in New York.
Why are they always picking on New York?
I don't know, or me.
We're alienating a lot of people here.
Yeah, I know. That's my job.
The other thing is, it's actually funny. Now when I call people in New York, they don't know what Charlottesville or Charlotte, or they have no idea where the hell it is. So, but that's important though, because we're the smallest hedge fund in the world probably, and we're in Charlottesville, Virginia, and obviously we're sort of off the map. The only reason why people will call us back, or why we can get coverage on Wall Street, is because they want to talk to us. It's a pretty pragmatic and straightforward idea, and it's sort of self-evident, but it's not the norm. And so I think doing what you can locally when you start a business or go to work for a company, just deal with the people you deal with in your sphere like you would if you were trying to manage a company the way Kip does, and I think that sort of builds on itself.
Kip, what advice do you have for the folks who want to start the next Container Store in a different industry, of course?
Well, the talent's the whole ball game. People are what makes the business happen or not happen, or happen really well. And free agents want to work for the team that they think has the greatest chance for a championship, right? And so it's really thrilling to work with people that you think are great. That's the best thing you can do for your employees. We've been on Fortune's 100 Best Companies to Work For in America list for 16 years, and it's mostly because people just love who they get to work with. And then once you have all those great people, figure out how to make them thrive. Seriously, make them thrive. This weekend, just focus on making the people around you thrive, and you will have the best weekend you've had in years. Because that's, and that's what purpose in life is. People say, oh, I don't really know what my purpose is. Making the people around you thrive is a great way to get purpose in life, and then you will be happier. And you can do that as a business too. And you can do that as a business leader, where you really are leading with love rather than leading with fear. And get great people, and then make them thrive, and you'll be very successful.
Raj, what do you tell your students?
Well, first of all, many of them, the more idealistic of them, come to me sometimes with ideas. They all want to address the big challenges. By the way, the millennials are the most meaning and purpose-driven generation that's ever existed, right, at a young age. So you get this intuitively. You've kind of grown up with this extraordinary infrastructure of the internet and the connectivity, as well as a consciousness of all of the big challenges that humanity faces. But they come to me with ideas for solving some of these challenges using a nonprofit model, right? Because that is seen as virtuous, that is seen as pure, as opposed to, oh God, making money out of something, right? It's like money is seen as inherently, those companies are seen as selfish and greedy. And I said, you should try to solve the same problem, but see if you can do it in the context of a for-profit business. Because if you do that, you will not be reliant on subsidies or donations, and you will be able to scale and grow. And you will actually ultimately have a much larger positive impact. Imagine if Whole Foods had started as a nonprofit, right? What kind of an impact would they have had beyond Austin, Texas? And today they're $14 billion and 85,000 employees, and they have transformed the entire industry and the food culture to a large degree. So for-profit is actually the more, in the long term, impactful way to be. So that's what I strongly recommend to entrepreneurs. And by the way, you're going to generate profits, which means you're going to generate taxes, which are going to then fund all kinds of infrastructure and the social safety net, etc. You cannot be part of all of that unless you're generating a surplus. So profit is a good thing. It's a social good, but it matters greatly how you make the money. You make it not by squeezing everybody else around you, because then you're a parasite. You're not a business, really. But if you can create not just financial, but social and cultural and emotional well-being and spiritual well-being and a positive impact on the environment, on people's health, and on the culture, that can be done. It does exist. Right? Therefore, it must be possible.
So, big question. I've often said that we need to be the generation, and we span a number of generations here, but we need to be the generation that makes business better. Right? What do we need to do? How does this happen faster? What kind of policies do we need? Do we need any? What kinds of things do we need to think about? Help us get the kind of big picture of moving to a world where people don't say, oh, that's too idealistic or unrealistic, et cetera, but when we think of a business, we think of higher purpose, stakeholders, conscious leadership, and ethical culture. What needs to happen to get there faster?
Well, I mean, it's almost like a trick question for me, right? Because I think, that's what we're trying to do with the Conscious Venture Lab, right? I mean, our goal in life is to change the way capitalism is practiced in America. And
that's the purpose of the lab.
that's the purpose of the Conscious Venture Lab, right? And everything we do, we look at through that lens. There are lots of policy things that I imagine that could happen. That's probably above my pay grade. We just try to engage entrepreneurs who want, and especially you're so right about millennials, Raj. I mean, we see that all the time. I mean, our best company right now is run by 3 University of Maryland MBAs that are 21, 22, and 23. And they're going to be a giant company because of the way they think about the world. So for us, I mean, we're trying to play one small piece in this and create how do we grow new companies that think like this? And I think the other thing that we're trying to play a role in is 2 things. Creating the capital stack, so we need more investors who want to look at these sorts of companies and are thinking differently about what capitalism ought to be, like Adrian's doing, like our friend Rick Fraser is doing. And then we're trying to engage the larger conscious capitalism universe, so companies like the Container Store and Whole Foods and Starbucks and Southwest, to see how we can partner with them to support entrepreneurs. So that's sort of the stack that we're playing in.
So you said, I'm going to push you a minute, you said, well, policy issues are above your pay grade, but what are some ideas that could give some more momentum?
Well, I think that one of the big problems we're having right now in the United States is that we have more businesses dying than we have businesses starting. And because of that, we're becoming, businesses in the United States are becoming decidedly middle-aged, which saps innovation. They're not as innovative as they could be. So there's lots of reasons why that's happening. Lots of those are policy reasons, right? So red tape in terms of procedures, policies, whether it take to start a new business, tax policy, right? We should really be thinking about how we incentivize angel investors and venture capitalists to invest in early stage business and hold those positions longer. Right? So the capital gains tax structure could change to make sure that we're starting new businesses, because that's where all the employment's coming from, first of all. So I think that from a policy standpoint, we need to do things that are driving early stage business for us.
Raj?
Yeah, I think the capital gains thing is an easy one. I mean, if you can change the rate, so if you hold an investment for a short period, the shorter the period of time you invest in something, the higher the capital gains rate should be, and the longer you hold it, the lower it should be, because short-term investing is an oxymoron. There's no such thing as short-term investing. That's speculating. And why should we put that on the same level as real investing? Beyond that, in terms of what we're doing, and we of course have the Conscious Capitalism, a nonprofit. We have a movement. We've got chapters in 30 cities in the US and about 6 or 7 other countries now. And this is growing rapidly. So there's a lot more grassroots activity that is happening here. And so we're continuing to push that. And we find that this is an idea that is universally appealing. It's not just in the American system, but it's places like Australia and Brazil and South Korea and India and the UK and South Africa and Chile and Mexico. I mean, it's very diverse types of locations because it's appealing to some fundamental, deeply held human values. And the last thing I want to say is, the rise of women in the world generally is a great, I think, positive development because women now are 60% of college students. They're the majority of the workforce. And finally, we're going to see the rise of feminine values and more women ascending to leadership roles. And that is going to fundamentally change the culture. And also, the men who are leading successfully in today's world are able to tap into both sides of themselves, the nurturing, caring relationships, etc., along with the So the integration of masculine and feminine virtues, I think, is one of the big stories. And that therefore makes me very optimistic that the world is moving in this direction.
A couple of minutes left, Adrian?
I won't close it, but I think the one thing to do is just change the way we talk about business. 'Cause I think this stuff is out there already. I think it's the way that good business is practiced. We just tend not to look at it and talk about it, and that's something that motivates me personally in what I do, and I think motivates you also to create sort of a track record, for lack of a better word, because people like that sort of thing. But just to talk about business in a different way, and stories like Kip's are enormously helpful to that end.
Kip, what do you think?
I think it's important to convince and illustrate, and Raj has done a great job with his books, and that if all you want to do is make as much money as humanly possible, as rapidly as possible, this methodology is superior to the other methodologies. And really convince people of that. We have, and eventually, a good capitalist is going to adopt that methodology which is most successful. So I see it as a really bright prospect. People are getting that message, and the people that are dominating their niches and doing the best, certainly in this country now, are more conscious capitalists than their competitors, vastly more so. And it's more fun, it's more profitable, and it's more fun. So what idiot wouldn't do something that's more profitable, it's more fun? If you're at a roulette table in a casino, and you're there with your friends and family, and all of your friends and family and you are winning, it's a blast. It's much more fun than if you're just winning by yourself, which is okay. But
Or
it's
not
really
winning
fun,
at all.
It's so,
And you're supposed to take me to the casino too.
yeah, it only happens for like 15 minutes a weekend, right? But it's kind of fun when it happens. But it's more fun and it's more profitable. And I think that the forums like this and the work that John Mackey does and all the, getting that word out there. Who's not going to do the thing that's more fun and more profitable? I'm feeling very optimistic about the future of it.
So I think, I know everyone on the panel would say to you, get out there and start something that matters. I want to thank the organizers and our panelists for a great conversation this morning. Appreciate it.
Another big thank you. Thank you all. I'm just going to say a quick word. There's not many folks that Ed Freeman has pulled all these folks in because you wanted to have dinner with Ed Freeman. And there's not too many people in the world that can assemble this caliber of a panel. And it just represents the thought leadership. And Ed, thank you so much for organizing this. Big hand to Ed. What a treat. What a treat.